I truly believe that prisons should be ran like Fortune 500 companies. The reason I say that if we had a business model that was like a Fortune 500 company, we would then do what Fortune 500 companies do, is give every employee a personality test. A personality test would give us a better idea of where they belong to start, right? And then they would enter into phase 4. They would enter into phase 1. Based on a personality test, we would understand the perspective that they hold about society, the perspectives they hold about themselves, perspectives they have about their crime, compassion and empathy, even some kind of the forgiveness that they're looking for, or the remorse that they have for what they've done. And then they would be put into a place where curriculum and coaching and mentorship is given to them.
My next guest and I met while we were both speaking at the same event, and he was kind enough to come listen to me speak, and obviously I stayed after to see what kind of message he had. I was blown away by his passion, by his knowledge on certain subjects, and his engaging personality. His perspectives at such a young age are pretty extraordinary. It goes along with a crazy story. But what I really wanted to elicit from this conversation were some perspectives that he took away from his experiences, and not necessarily his story straight through beginning to end. I wanted to know what lessons he learned at certain stages. And I think you're going to be really, really impressed with some of the answers he has, and some really, really good answers. So in TCast fashion, let's let Tony do the rest of the talking. Welcome, TonyMhoffman. The place I thought I might start, instead of being terribly boring and just saying, hey, where'd you grow up? I'm curious to know, once we learn more about your story, I'm curious to know what type of family unit you grew up with, and what kind of environment you had with your familial.
Yeah. Sure. You want to go into that now?
Yeah.
Okay. Yeah. Sorry. I guess you could say that a typical boomer upper middle class family. So you've got mom and dad that are working units. Mom works hard, dad works hard, and they worked a lot of hours. Dad's goal was to build a retirement account. Mom was on board with that vision. And so to build that retirement account so they would be safe in their elder years was to work. And them working a lot really meant that they weren't around the house too much. And so I was raised by a babysitter, basically, is what I try to tell people. And she was great. Vera was great, Hispanic lady, and really took care of me and my brother for all the times that my parents were at work. My parents moved from Southern California. San Diego is where they're from. I don't know if you know anything about California.
Yeah.
San Diego, beach town. They were East County, so not necessarily next to the beach, but my dad was a motocross racer, professional motocross racer.
Really?
Yeah. So he actually, do you know who Ricky Johnson is, by the way, by any chance?
I don't
So
think
before Jeremy McGrath, do you know who Jeremy McGrath is?
Of course,
Okay, before Jeremy McGrath, there was Ricky Johnson. Ricky Johnson, I think 5 or 6 time Supercross champion. My dad taught him how to ride a motorcycle when he was a kid.
Wow.
And so East County, San Diego was actually a really big area for a lot of the motocrossers
Kind of a hub.
before it moved to the south and to the East Coast of the United States. So my parents are from San Diego. They get involved in the trucking industry and moved to Southern California and further north, and then got offered the job in Northern California. And that's where we moved. They moved us out of Fresno, where we were. It was kind of a tough area, and moved us over to a place called Clovis.
And that was at about what age when you moved there?
I think we moved to Clovis in 87. I was born in 83. So these are like the years that I don't really have a memory, right?
Sure. Yeah.
My memories really start towards the tail end of living in our home in Fresno. I have some spotted memories of the house and the pool and the jungle gym set that we had. And then we moved to Clovis. And when we moved to Clovis, we talked about some of these neighborhoods turning over here, of some of the older homes getting knocked down and becoming new homes. I grew up, Clovis was an area where everything was farms, and then it became homes. So my backyard growing up for several years was an almond orchard in
that's
Clovis.
awesome.
But Clovis was known for their school district. They had a school district that was, I guess you could say, conservative. So they had a lot of dress codes. Their teachers had, kind of ethical standards that they operated on, and their curriculum was progressive in terms of you were learning more at a fourth grade level than you were at a fourth grade level in Fresno County. Yeah. So we were getting a good education. And so that was kind of what my childhood looked like. When my parents were at work all the time, they put us in some of the top public schools in the United States. And I played sports. That's what me and my brother did.
So if you had to like map out the perfect way to have a successful upbringing and not run into trouble, that would almost be it.
Yeah. I don't think, looking back, I don't think my parents, they didn't do anything that would have caused issues later in my life. They gave us all the tools and put us in places that we needed to be for us to be successful. And that's it. We had everything we needed.
And your brother is just one sibling you have?
My brother's 2 years older than me. He'll be 40 this year in October.
Okay.
We're polar opposites. When we get into this story, like my brother is polar opposite, which, really kind of expands into the whole, you can be raised under the same roof with everything that you need and turn out completely different than another person that's being raised in the same rules, same mom and dad,
No question. Yeah, well, I'm one of four, and we certainly have differences too, and personalities and even the ones close in age are just different. So it's interesting to know.
Mm-hmm.
'Cause I think that's important too, because I think a lot of the stigma about people that run into issues is that, they had, parents that were irresponsible or were addicts themselves or ran into issues like that.
Yeah.
And one of the things I wanted to kind of circle around to at some point, and if you think it's better to maybe tell some of your story now, but where I'm trying to go with it is, I know that you had a guy that kind of ended up being somewhat of your savior of sorts and getting and allowing you opportunities to crash and chat with somebody and give you shelter when you needed it, that type of thing.
Mm-hmm.
And you've also grown up with a family who was trying to raise you responsibly, and when you go off the rails, the family at some point has to make a decision about what is the difference between being the bro that can help you and being an enabler.
Sure. Yeah.
So I'd be really curious to know at some point where that line is. Obviously it's fuzzy in each case, it's going to be different, but do you have any animosity, or would you have done anything differently in terms of being cut off once the rails started kind of?
Yeah. So I guess laying the groundwork, I did grow up in a home where everything was provided that would need to be provided for an individual to be successful, happy, and self-sufficient at some point, right? Because that's the goal. We should be raising kids who can be self-sufficient, not only in a physical world, but also in an emotional world. And so that's kind of where the split occurs, right? As I had everything in the physical world, but I was missing some components that were in the emotional world, my parents being absent, and also my parents kind of being that boomer generation that's focused solely on providing and not nourishment in terms of emotional care. And that's not to say that every boomer does not know how to emotionally care for their kids, because some were lucky enough to kind of get that and they pass that on to their children. So for me, at 12 years old, I began to start struggling internally with my emotions, who I am, my gifts. I didn't like that I was good at sports because I had social anxiety. My social anxiety really didn't want the attention. My compassion and empathetic side of myself has always been there. And so I didn't like being better than people at sports. And so then being better than people at sports was this clash of, I do this because I'm good at it, but I hate that I'm good at it because it gets all this attention. Then there's these individuals or mentors, coaches that want me to be, champion driven. And I don't want to put in that time and sacrifice because I don't know how to be a leader. And I don't want to be looked at as a leader because then that means I'm better than you. And in my mind at 12 years old,
it exacerbates the whole.
Yeah. So I had just have this whole hurricane of stuff that's occurring at 12 years old. And I don't have a place that I'm having a conversation about it. We're not talking about mental health in the mid 90s. This is go to school, take good tests, get good test scores, go to college, get a job, have a retirement.
Yeah.
That's life.
And if you're having problems, just rub dirt on it and
Yeah.
get back out there.
Yeah. Or we have old belief systems that if you have problems, it's because of your parents, or if you have problems, it's because of X, Y, and Z. It's never a gray matter situation, right? It's just black or it's white.
Right.
And if you fall on the black or the white side, it's either a good or bad thing in terms of why you are the way you are, which is not the way life works.
Right. It's not necessarily accurate either 99% of the time. It's a great presumption. I think that still exists today, which is why I'm curious.
Sure. Yeah. And listening to your story the first time that I got to hear it, your own experiences, I think, led you to a really deep understanding of gray matter, right? Of the gray area, why things occur the way they do. It's not always so black and white. There's a deeper understanding that we need to have about outcomes with people's behaviors and certain things like that. And so I'm struggling with my mental health. I don't really have a way to deal with it. I'm successful at BMX. By the time I'm 18, I'm on the cover of a magazine, the largest BMX racing magazine in the world, sponsored by Fox Racing, Airwalk shoes, Spy sunglasses. As an amateur, these are companies that in BMX don't support amateur athletes, but they're supporting me. My buddy who is a 5-time world champion, I don't know, two or 3-time national champion, Randy Stumphauser, he's a Hall of Fame BMXer. He wrote me a letter when I was in prison and said, dude, I thought when you were done with high school that you were going to turn pro and you were going to take over the sport. So I had a lot of talent, but despite having talent, I was completely unhappy with myself, with others. And that was kind of what led me to start, experimenting with drugs. Because not only was I struggling on the inside, but I'm 18 years old now. Kids are going to parties. Kids are drinking. Kids are smoking weed. They're not quite popping pills at this time, but it's right around the corner. Yeah. And it was when I found the pills that my life really took a turn. And my parents at that time had an understanding that I was choosing pills and drugs over family. Simple. It's black or it's white.
Right.
Simply stop making that choice because that's not the right choice and everything will then be fine. So in their mind, a black and white issue needs a black and white solution. And that is to cut him off, don't talk to him, and let him realize that his choices that he's making are against the family's belief and they're not self-empowering choices. And at some point, I would become in such pain that I would realize, man, my choices suck.
You hit rock bottom.
I need to change, right? But that's not the way it works. And my family knows that now, right? The continuation of use, addiction, was self-medication for a problem that started at 12 years old. It was my anxiety, my depression, my suicidal thoughts. It was hating who I was. It was, not having self-love, self-compassion, belief in myself. Even though I was on the cover of a magazine, I still had self-esteem issues. Yeah. Most people would think, oh, dude, this guy's got the confidence of the world. Even now, people probably think, oh, this guy's got the confidence of the world. Sure, in some things, but in a lot of things, I'm still dealing with the 12-year-old self.
Yeah. I mean, it's part of your personality. I mean, social anxiety is something that you manage.
Yeah. It's still
like eradicate it, right?
Right. No, it's not. I wish I could eradicate it, but I've learned to love what it is and use it as a tool for me to be successful. I've just understood that every tool has a dull part of itself, right? A hammer's not a saw and a saw is not a hammer. And so my social anxiety might be a hammer in some ways and a saw in other ways. I recognize where the tool is great for me and I recognize where it doesn't work. So managing that is important. But my parents took that, get out of the house. This is how we run our household. And you can't call us or contact us or be with us until you have 6 months of sobriety, which I don't know how to get sobriety, dude.
Right. It's not a plan. That's not a plan that you can put into action.
No, like I'm already, on the life skills side of thing, I'm already not very good.
Yeah.
I sucked in school. I wasn't good at self-starting. I wasn't good at homework because it just didn't really interest me. But at the same time, some of those things that you learn in school actually give you tools for how to go get a job on your own, how to get something you don't know what to do, sit down and find solutions and get answers and move forward.
Yeah, sure.
I'm not a big person on school, But I still think that every person should give it their best because there are life skills that you can develop from being in a classroom.
And that's super hard for most teenagers and adolescents to kind of understand too. A lot of it, there's tons of, I call bullshit on this class. Why are we having to learn this? This doesn't apply to anything because, at 14, that's where you max out because you know everything at 14 anyway.
Sure,
right?
sure. Yeah, you know everything at 22 and 22 and 23.
So at the point in which it was coming to a head in your household, were you at a point to where you feel like if the right solution were posed, you were in a position to accept it?
Yeah. Oh, yeah. I think so. But that probably wasn't in the beginning. I mean, even in the middle. And to give your listeners an idea of what the middle looks like is, I start using marijuana at 18. I also find Oxycontin somewhere around the end of my 18-year-old age. Oxycontin or pharmaceutical painkillers was really my relief. Weed, cocaine, meth, all those drugs don't really help my anxiety, which is the root of why I wanted to use.
Did you know it? Were you aware that's why you wanted to use?
At this time, I'm not. Okay. And anybody that's struggling with inactive addiction cannot answer these questions.
Okay.
It's just impossible. If they can answer these questions, these are individuals that have been to treatment several times and can sit down in front of you and feed you answers that you want to hear, but it's not actually the cold hard truth and the deep true discovery, right? It's just another form of manipulation. So at this time, I have no idea why I'm using. At this time, I would tell you I don't have a problem. At 21 years old, I commit a home invasion robbery at gunpoint, robbed a family inside their house, right? Even after, I still would have told you, I don't have a problem. I just made a dumb choice. Because I'm still not ready to admit that what I'm doing is self-medicating what hurts the most. Because if I give that to you, then I have to feel the pain that's causing me to use in the first place.
And you're accountable too at that point, because then you kind of know what you should do. But you're not really facing that because it's easier to continue down the road.
And there's just so much self-deception, denial. It really takes work to remove those pieces to get back to the core parts of the brain that's really driving an individual into these actions. And so after the robbery, I'm at 21. My parents spent a bunch of money on an attorney. Being a white kid from the good side of town, my co-defendant's dad's the lead robbery squad detective of the Fresno PD. So we've got like a high-ranking cop's son, which is almost like being a cop in courts yourself. You're not, chances of you getting in trouble or at least having some kind of high consequence are minimal. So he gets a good deal. So essentially, I get a good deal. I get out, don't go to jail. I got 5 years felony probation, 90 days in a treatment center, and a bunch of programs to do over the 5 years that I'm on probation. After that is when the time comes in where my buddy was like my savior. Nate, my best friend, was always a place for me to stay. He always gave me food to eat. When I was at like my physical rock bottom, I had tried to contact my parents at that time for help, but you need 6 months of sobriety. Go check yourself into rehab. There was like 2 rehabs that you could go to. In today's world, it would be very easy, right? My parents had great health insurance. We'll find a rehab that takes our insurance. It won't cost us any money, and we'll send you that treatment center. I would have went.
You would have gone at that point.
Oh yeah, I went to and I know this because I was offered an opportunity to go to Oregon. My childhood friend's family left Fresno and went to start 200 acres of vineyards in Southern Oregon. They were going to became winemakers.
Awesome. And
they said, we want you to get your life together. We'll get you a bus ticket and we'll bring you up here and we'll train you and we'll make you a ranch manager. And I want to get clean.
Yeah.
Like I know I'm destroying my life at this point. Like it's not getting any better. Like I've got a problem, right? I get on the bus. Oddly, I get on the bus and I go up there, but I couldn't make it. 7 days later, I tried to steal their tractor to take it to the bus station. Couldn't start the tractor. So I hitchhiked to a bus station, snuck on the bus because I had no money. Nobody would give me money to get on the bus. And I came back to Fresno. So I know that if there was an opportunity for me to go to a treatment center, I would have went. Now, I don't know what the outcome would have been versus the outcome that happened with the way my story went going through prison and stuff, because there was so much desperation at that point. Prison was actually kind of the first step towards the climb upward.
It's almost your cold turkeys. You don't have a choice to steal something and go get a fix again. And so one of the, if you allow me to back up a little bit, one of the things that I was fascinated about in trying to get some perspective on is when you commit a criminal act, because you're basically, even if you had asked you at the time, are you a criminal? Are you, you know, and even a street code. I mean, you robbed the wrong dude's mom. I mean, you would have admitted, well, no, that's a terrible thing to do. You don't want to scare the crap out of somebody's mom.
Right.
But you're willing to do it. So I'm just curious if you could help enlighten people in terms of a mindset, because it's not really truly who you are. You ask you now, there's 0% chance that you would go do that.
Yeah. A negative chance.
Yeah.
I'll take you through the whole thing. I mean, I think it's important for people to understand this. The withdrawals are extremely painful off opioids. It's the worst flu times 100. You know what I'm saying? I had COVID and it lasted 2 weeks for me. Luckily, it didn't take my life. It's taken a lot of people's life, and I have compassion for that and sympathy for those who have lost loved ones. And COVID was pretty painful for me. It knocked me out with a lot of exhaustion. But COVID versus withdrawals is not even close. I would take COVID again, even with the cough and the respiratory infection, over opioid withdrawals, because there's this mechanism that, you know, if you can just get this drug, you can stop the pain that you're immediately in, right? And that knowing that you can do that, it takes you to a level of desperation that most individuals will probably never experience in their life. And that's when you become willing to do something that you would never do in your life. When I woke up the day that we did that robbery, we were all withdrawing, me and the 4 other people that I was with in that house. And it was just a joke. Let's go rob dude's mom. And then the joke became serious because, well, how are we going to get high today? You know, we're withdrawing. And we decided that we were going to do it. And as we were driving over to the house, I actually said, fuck it, dude. We're not doing it. And turned around.
Just that your subconscious
said, don't do this. Yeah. This is stupid, right? Yeah. And I don't tell that part of the story much. It's just, we turned around and we went back to the house, and we were probably about 60 seconds away. And, you know, I'm cold sweat, you know, starting to shake. And I said, fuck it, we're turning around. And we drove back. And that was the defining moment. Was the whole time I knew we were messing up. But I just tried to focus on what we needed out of the house. I didn't want to hurt the lady. I explained to her many times, I'm not here to hurt you. I just want the Oxycontin. She even told the police, he didn't touch my purse. He didn't take our jewelry. He didn't take nothing. He went straight to the closet, grabbed the Oxycontin, and left.
You're a gentleman robber.
Gentleman robber, right? But that's because I knew what I was doing wasn't right, you know, but the pain that I was in from the drugs was so deep that it was almost like I had to do it. I mean, we could sit back and say, well, you didn't have to do it. You could have made the choice. But until you've been in a situation where you're experiencing extreme opioid withdrawal, where your body is warning at you, telling you that you need to get this drug to fix this feeling, you don't ever really fully understand what it's like to make a decision based on what you think you have to do to survive.
And you're with other people that are perpetuating the idea, as opposed to having an accountability partner that's trying to talk sense into you.
Sure.
You're almost like in the wrong crowd too, obviously.
Yeah. And don't, let's not get it twisted. Those guys that I was with would have probably taken my lead if I said no.
It sounded like they did.
They did.
Yeah.
You know, and you know, when I went into court, they had every belief that I was the bad guy. Even though I was in there for 1 robbery, my co-defendants were in there for 3. You know, by the time they got busted, they had 3 armed robberies under their belt. And so, but I was still labeled the career criminal. I was still labeled the bad guy from Clovis. But why? Because when I went in front of the cops during all of my interrogations, I didn't tell them anything. All these kids were willing to give up something for a better deal.
Right.
And I literally told them, I don't know what you're talking about.
Yeah.
Like my fingerprints aren't on the pill bottles. You don't have any guns with my fingerprints. These guys are just incriminating me because they need a fall guy.
Mm-hmm.
So basically you're going to have to prove that it was me. And so I guess they had every right to believe that this is the guy that we want to get.
You're stuck with whatever resulting decision that they have, because that's all they have to go by.
Yeah. And I was willing to run that belief system into the ground, which is the crazy part, because a lot of individuals that I met in prison were willing to hold the street code and lose their life as a result of it, you know?
Yeah. That's always something that I like to talk about too. And we've had different folks, and we had a couple of weeks ago with Jason White from the First 48.
Mm-hmm.
And I see how his job is, he's constantly having to jump over hurdles because he has to always work around the fact that somebody saw this murder happen in their neighborhood, but they're adhering to the code, and therefore they're not saying anything. And it's, to each their own, really. I think It just kind of depends on the nobility of the circumstance, or,
Yeah.
I can understand in certain circumstances too, if you have to snitch your neighbor out and you have to still live with your neighbor, that makes it a dangerous situation as opposed to.
And that's gray matter.
Right.
Right. You can tell on somebody in the neighborhood and lose your life, or you can just mind your own business that has nothing to do with you and go about your day and still get to live. And if they had the money to leave that area, guess what? They would leave that area.
Right.
It's not as simple. I mean, even for middle-class individuals, you can't just pack your bags, load up a U-Haul, and move across the country.
Yeah.
If you could, more people would be doing it, right?
Yeah.
It's just gray area.
Yeah. And of course, there's the distrust for the police too, because there's so many mishandlings of informants and stuff that they just want to go and turn around and say, guess what Tony just said? We have this now. And you're like, dude, you're supposed to be dropping my name. I'm trying to help you. So that happens a lot too. I know there's definitely a double-edged sword on that.
Absolutely. So yeah, there was a desperation that led me to make that decision. And I knew that it was wrong, but the desperation was so much higher than my conscience at that point.
That's fascinating. And I think it's important to know the why. It's not necessarily an excuse, but it lends someone to be a little bit more compassionate about someone's circumstance, because there's still a lot of black and white about, there's a lot of black and white about just being an addict and buying dope on the street, let alone robbing somebody at gunpoint.
Yeah. And I think that there's the gray area to that is individuals should be awarded a chance to rehabilitate, but if they don't, they must be treated accordingly. I think one of the things that I appreciated was the chief of police or somebody high-ranking police official in Washington, D.C. We can't treat criminals with compassion. What we need to do is define what a criminal actually is, right? A repeat offender, a repeat violent offender. We can't continue to treat them with compassion like they're just going to change their lives, or because they grew up in a situation that was unfair. They found their mom dead in a bathroom when they were 10 years old, and dad's been in and out of prison. So they were raised by grandma, and their brother was a gangbanger. So they got involved in gangs, right? We could take that story and say, well, yeah, how did you think this was going to turn out?
Right.
We want to try and give this person every opportunity to flip the script, get his life in order, and be a productive part of society. But if he doesn't, we have to also treat him accordingly.
Right.
Right.
Well, for the protection of others.
Yeah, absolutely. But right now, I think that society is moving into this era of knowing why individuals turn out kind of in situations where it's a little more rough than other people. And we overexpress compassion, right? We're removing consequence from situations because we're so compassionate on the beginning stage that we think that, well, we'll just remove consequences, right? We look at California and a lot of the areas that are really struggling, like San Francisco. Well, what do you think is going to happen if you basically decriminalize theft under $900?
Right.
Theft goes through the roof.
Right.
And it's not just it's, and the people that are doing the stealing in these stores are organized crime units. They're individuals that aren't strung out on drugs, that know that if they go in, they can grab this stuff and then they leave. And then 5 blocks away, they're posted up on a street corner selling all the stuff that they just stole from CVS. Knowing even if they get caught, there's an 85% chance that the district attorney's going to drop it.
Right.
They're not even going to get in trouble. it's an overextension of compassion.
That is definitely an overextension of compassion. And I do believe there should be more compassion in education and rehabilitation in prisons, but the consequence, without having a consequence, then I think everything would fall apart.
It lends to chaos.
Yeah. I mean, there has to be consequences. That's the whole point of raising a child the way you do. And you teach them that when you do this and this and this, that's the only reason you knew what you were doing was wrong in the first place.
Right.
So that has to happen, obviously. Well, tell me about how you ended up in prison and maybe a little bit about your prison experience. I know you get a lot of these questions, but I'm curious too. We've had a lot of discussions about the prison system and whether or not you were able to begin. You insinuated you began your journey to recovery there because of kind of a cold turkey scenario, and you spent a decent amount of time.
2 years, yeah.
Okay, yeah,
a decent amount. So I actually don't get asked a lot about prison. I wish I did. I think people are kind of timid around the topic. Maybe it's not something we should really ask that guy. So let's dig into it. So I was homeless in 2006, the last half of 2006, the beginning of 2007. And when I say homeless, I've talked to a lot of people that were quote unquote homeless, but they lived in somebody's house.
Right.
They just didn't have mom and dad's house or their own place they called home. Like I was sleeping behind dumpsters, dirt fields, on the street, motels when I'm lucky. Luckier, somebody's house. So I'm bouncing around. I'm homeless. I get arrested January 22nd, 2007. And 30 days later, I'm sentenced to 4.5 years in prison. I got to do 2 years on that sentence.
This for a probation violation?
Probation violation, basically. Yeah, they busted me in a house I broke into that was up for rent. I had like 20 needles on me, and those needles were an infraction, but it was enough to violate me. I hadn't reported to probation in over 6 months. There was a warrant for my arrest, basically.
Right.
So they violate my probation. They give me the 4.5 years in prison, which was time for the robbery charge in 2005. So we fast forward 2 years at this point. Mm-hmm. When I get to prison, obviously, I don't know anything about it. I'm scared. And, I'm kind of directed by some individuals that have, seasoned experience in prison. Stay away from the gambling tables. Don't get involved in drinking. Stay away from drugs. Don't get in debt. Trying to steer me in a good way, right? Stay away from the prison politics. And I've never been in prison in Texas, so I don't know what it's like in terms of like racial tension and politics and stuff. But in California, racial tension is a big thing. Whites aren't allowed to be with blacks. You're allowed to be with Mexicans, but they don't encourage it because if there's a riot, you're going to get stabbed by a Mexican no matter what. They're going to come after you first, right? And so there's all this stuff. The one thing that I do know is that when I was in there, it wasn't a place for rehabilitation. It was just a place to house people for however long that you were there. Mm-hmm. And I talk about this in my book. I truly believe that prisons should be ran like Fortune 500 companies, right? There's a leader who understands the vision and the mission of the company, and his leadership filters down all the way to the lowest level worker. Mm-hmm. And those workers understand the job that they have, what needs to be done, and how they're going to do it or why they're doing it, right? If we had that, we would probably come up with a better system than, okay, you're in here for murder, you're going to a level 4 yard. Okay, you're in here for mayhem, you're going to a level 3 yard. You're in here for petty drugs, well, you're going to a level 1 yard. Level 4 being maximum security. A lot of times those guys are doing yard and dog kennel. They don't get to come out. They're treated as if they are the highest of the high, lowest of the lows in terms of human capacity or compassion for humans or society. One being, you're just in here because of drugs. You should get a chance to get out of here soon, and we'll give you the most out of your time while you're here. The reason I say that if we had a business model that was like a Fortune 500 company, we would then do what Fortune 500 companies do, is give every employee a personality test. A personality test would give us a better idea of where they belong to start, right? Yeah. And then they would enter into phase 4. They would enter into phase 1. based on a personality test, we would understand the perspective that they hold about society, the perspectives they hold about themselves, perspectives they have about their crime, compassion and empathy, even some kind of the forgiveness that they're looking for, or the remorse that they have for what they've done. And then they would be put into a place where curriculum and coaching and mentorship is given to them to help move them along the spectrum that they're
addresses the weaknesses in their personality.
Right? But that would also put us in a position where guards were educated individuals on the people they were guarding. Right?
Yeah.
Because when I was in there, every inmate's a piece of shit.
That's how I was dealt with. Yeah.
That's it.
Yeah.
You know, like, who the fuck are you? Excuse my language. I don't know if I'm allowed to cuss.
You are.
Okay.
Go ahead.
You know, you're a piece of shit, bro. Like, I'm here to watch you because you're a piece of shit. And I don't want to be here to watch you because you're a piece of shit, but I get paid enough that that's why I'm here. That's the typical mentality of a guard.
Yep.
Right? And then the guards will walk like inmates, start talking like inmates, almost behaving like inmates because they're in this realm of street life.
Yeah.
But they're guards.
Right.
Right? And so because they're guards, they get to treat you like you are the piece of shit. Now, that's not to say every guard in there, because there are guards in there that understand individuals' stories, I think, and recognize that there are some good people in there that have done some things that have cost them their freedom. But the lack of organization in terms of vision and mission and how we treat inmates and what the goal is to do with inmates is non-existent in the state of California. And I think that that's why when I got out of prison in 2008, right before 2009, the recidivism rate was 93%.
Yeah, it's one of the, exactly.
Let's just look at it as a business model.
Yeah, and why in the world do you think that perpetuates? It's because there was no improvement made during that time. All you did was put them in a cage and made them worse.
Right.
And again, the other thing is you're associating with other people who are being mistreated, who are also just trying to figure out the next ruse, because what else are they supposed to do?
And most individuals in there, we have to understand this. Most individuals in there, I think some over 80% of individuals that are in there come from fatherless homes. Right. So we're coming from broken homes, many of them coming from broken neighborhoods. They operate on one level of perspective or mental capacity, and that is instinct to survive. And their instincts were taught to them, right? Either through their neighbors, through their parents, through their mom, through their dad. Coping mechanisms were taught through the neighborhood, through their mom or dad. So using drugs, drinking. Sexual abuse is rampant in lower socioeconomic areas.
Right.
Not talked about. Addiction is through the roof, right? And so when an individual gets to prison, they've gotten there because of their instinctual ability to think and react to situations that are in front of them. When you put 1,600 individuals that are Olympic level, but on the opposite spectrum, it perpetuates crime. It perpetuates self-destructive behaviors. It perpetuates resentment. It perpetuates attitudes that cause more problems than it does good.
Yeah.
And why? Because there's nothing in there breaking that mold. Work in there is go make t-shirts for 5 cents an hour. Work in there is go bottle milk for 5 cents an hour. Work in there is go to school and listen to a teacher that's getting paid more than a regular teacher, but he doesn't really care. He's just here for the money.
Right. And
so you're going through this system.
And you have less real true accountability and consequences to face. So you're again, it's the same type of issues that you face when you do grow up without a father, and you're made to take an immature brain as you're growing up in the street and learning from your bros that also don't have fathers or direction or whatever, which is not in every person's case, but
right.
Obviously your consequences and accountability are everything. It kind of goes back to that same thing.
That's right.
That's not part of your curriculum or part of your understanding. I mean, it's almost not even, you're not even properly weighing the consequence of being put in a cage at that point. All you're trying to do is survive. Like you said. Yeah.
And you only know how to survive based on what's 3 feet in front of you.
Interesting.
There's no 100-foot vision.
Yeah.
There's no 5-year vision, 10-year vision. It's what do I need to do right now to get a pack of cigarettes, to get food, to get heroin, to feel comforted, to make sure that I feel safe. That's it.
Yeah. Fascinating.
And when you get out, it's almost worse. When I got out, they gave you $200, a bus ticket if you needed one, and said, good luck.
And then you take off with no plan to get yourself on your feet and a stigma of having been in prison, which
you're not going to get a
every
job.
opportunity in half.
Yeah, you're not going to get a job.
Right.
You were in prison? No, we're not giving you a job.
Right.
It's really unfortunate. But again, if we had the Fortune 500 business model, the whole thing would be ran on incentive and performance. And those who just didn't want to perform, that's fine. You can spend your time in a cell.
Mm-hmm.
Your decisions don't hurt us, but we're going to now put you in a cell where you lose privilege, and we're going to focus on those who see what we have as an opportunity to change, to become something that they deserve to be, to have their own house, to have their own apartment, to have a healthy relationship, to have a job, to pay taxes, that see that as something that's awarding to not only themselves, but society.
Yeah, it's amazing. Yeah. And I know there are some programs like that they've implemented, but again, I don't know how they make that selective process happen, because it needs to be, like you said, a more widespread practice where everybody that goes through there is determined not to go back.
That's right. That's right. And, again, it's an overextension of compassion. When Obama came in, we recognized that a lot of these low-level offenders didn't need to be spending so much time in prison, so we let them out. But what did we let them out to? Nothing.
The dealers.
You're out.
Yeah, they go back to their dealers.
Yeah, because we don't have a system in place for them to rehabilitate. Yeah, they shouldn't be in there for 5 years long if they had 3 grams of cocaine on them. Sure, I agree.
Mm-hmm.
But they're not going to just stop because they're low-level offenders. I was just in Oregon giving us a speech, and I was talking to an owner of a treatment center, and I wanted to know about the legalization of drugs there, because they basically decriminalized.
It's one of my questions to you. So I was going to ask you about your sentiment on this.
So I'm okay with it, but only if we have systems in place that are actual diversions, right? So I wanted to know, how does this work? Did you guys get a government contract? How are they supporting all these people that need treatment?
Yeah.
By legalizing and not putting people in jail, because there's never enough treatment centers in this country. So how is Oregon, of all places, that's not a common place for treatment, supporting this need? And she said, we're not. And I said, well, did you get a contract with the government? And she goes, no, it'll take years. And I was like, how many? She goes, 2 to 3 years to get this OHA contract. And I said, so who's getting them? And she goes, the people that already had them. And I said, so basically you're telling me there's no way there's enough treatment centers to support the need. And she goes, no. And I know what do? They go right back to the street,
right,
and repeat the process or the cycle that they're in,
or end up doing something crazier to support the habit. And then they are put in the fourth level.
Yeah.
Right.
Right. Yeah. And it sucks, because I understand why we would legalize it, but you're talking about $1 billion infrastructure, mental health hospitals to take care of those who have mental health issues, schizophrenia, and, these mental disorders that are beyond drugs.
Mm-hmm. Then
you need many facilities to support those who are in active addiction and need the proper treatment spectrum, because it's not just 30 days you're finished, right? Proper treatment would really be, a year long, with housing and job opportunities at the
treatment
end.
has recidivism too, right?
4% if people can make it to 10 years of sobriety. But why? We have to take a look at why that is. Because the typical treatment model right now is 30 days, 45 days at the max. And then you go into outpatient, and outpatient doesn't help you get a job. Outpatient doesn't give you a housing. They give you opportunities, but oftentimes opportunities aren't enough for somebody that's only got 45 days of sobriety.
Yeah.
They need a helping hand. How do we do that? It takes a lot of resources, right?
So in general, it was a kind of a cool idea that makes sense on paper, but the planning in terms of the depth of being able to pull it off doesn't exist.
Yeah. I mean, we could totally get into conspiracies, but a lot of times I believe that some of these people really want to destroy their communities, man. I just don't. There has to be consequences.
Yeah.
San Francisco, bro, used to be my favorite city. And I haven't been there in 6 years. My buddy just went to a Dodgers Giants game. And he's like, Hoff, every street has needles and human shit.
Yeah.
Every street.
Yeah.
Like, it wasn't like that 6 years ago.
Yeah.
Like, what are we doing?
It is unbelievable. So when you were, before I get too far into the stories, I'd like to pick up on your story too from here. But when you were existing amongst the homeless and were in your essence, were homeless with the rest of the folks that were out on the street, were you experiencing that most of them had an opportunity if they were given the right opportunity, or was it a mental health mostly, or was it addiction mostly, or what types of things? I know there's a lot of politicians pitch solutions for things like this, and you just assume that it's addiction or mental health. Is that kind of the case that you saw?
Yeah. Well, yeah. So I'll say this. My interaction with other homeless people at this time was very minimal because I didn't want to integrate into homeless community. I was still fighting.
You weren't.
I was fighting still to keep myself on my feet. I hadn't quite reached a point where I submitted myself to go one step further down or backwards.
Just, concede that you're going to be homeless and start dealing with that.
Right. Which is finding homeless shelters, food shelters, where the drugs are within the homeless community, and then becoming a person in that community. Right. I'm still trying to get rides and buying phones from 7-Eleven when I can and putting minutes on them and so forth. But I will say this, because of my homeless experience, it's made me dig deep into understanding the homeless population. Not every homeless person is somebody that struggles with addiction or mental health. Some of these individuals are people who fall on bad times. They lose their house, they lose their marriage, and they don't have an overwhelming will to survive. So what happens? They go to the street and they accept that as their reality. And sometimes, you hear these crazy stories or see them on Facebook where a guy's in Florida playing on a piano every day. He looks completely beat up. Yeah. People start filming him because he's impressive on a piano. And then they find out that he actually lost his job and his family and fell on bad times and just gave up on life. But he was extremely talented. He ended up with a music contract. He's married now and sharp looking. You wouldn't even know it.
It's an awesome story. Yeah, I saw that.
But there's other stories like Red from Fresno. He grew up in Southeast Fresno. He was sexually abused from the ages of 8 to 11 years old. His mom was a prostitute and he never met his dad. When you have a situation where you're growing up sexually abused, you have the trauma of that. When you two have a mother who's a prostitute, you can pretty much infer that the men were in and out of the house.
Right.
A 10-year-old boy is watching men come in and out of the house, and his mom is, in his mind, choosing these men over him. He now has a very skewed perspective of his value in the world, right? Because he's, one, been sexually abused by his neighbor, and two, his mother finds value in men for money more than she does comforting him with the compassion, care, and nurturing that he needs as a child, just as a child. And so he's going to get kicked out of school, right? We can almost guarantee that an individual like this has no discipline, has no structure or ability to sit in a classroom. So then our institutions at a educational level are set up in which you have to do X, Y, and Z on the assembly line. If you don't, we remove you from that assembly line and we try and put you on another assembly line that's much lower in its expectations, which you're also probably not going to be able to meet those expectations. And then you drop out of school.
And we'll also surround you with other people who are also not meeting expectations, right, so that can be your peer.
Right. And when we talk about the other assembly line, we basically dumb down the curriculum, right? We don't actually come in with a more creative rehabilitative process in fixing these individuals based on, like I'm saying, with the Fortune 500 company. Personality tests find out where these kids are at and what we actually need to do, and specifically serve that individual's life in the way that it's needed. So once we have mistrust in the familial piece and we have mistrust in an institutional piece, then they go into society. right? And even the most successful individuals can look at a societal piece and say, man, it's not a place for the faint-hearted, right? You get used, abused. There's all kinds of people that are out after greed. A lot of people don't care. It's money driven. It's self-driven.
Political.
It's political. There's people that will do you wrong to advance themselves. There's people that will do you wrong so you can't advance yourself. It's just the way the world is, right? So we have mistrust of family, mistrust with society, institutions, and then we get into society, and what do they find out? We can't trust anybody in society either. Then we get a big wig come in, and he says, as he meets you in the street, or she meets you in the street, you've been there for 6 years. And the reason you've been there for 6 years is because at 18 or 21 years old, the federal government cut off paying the foster family that you ended up in. And they kicked you out of the house because there was no benefit anymore to them. This person comes up to you as you've been on the street for 6 years and says, we have a housing opportunity for you. Why would they say yes? No one in their entire existence of life has ever offered them anything that was true
and followed through. Yeah.
There's always a string.
Yeah.
And they know that at that point, they won't meet your expectations and you're just going to snip the string. You snip the string, then they have to deal with what? More shame, more guilt, more mistrust, more feeling like the world is out to get them.
Which is why they just concede that, look, I'm here. As bad as I'm at, bad as the place that I am, I can deal with this because I can control my
environment,
my immediate environment.
Just leave me alone.
Yeah, I can make it through today.
And I get chills, thinking about that because it's taken a lot of work for me to understand that dynamic, and it's crazy because stigma is perpetuated at such a young age. I gave a speech to an elementary school, and a little 10-year-old says, I don't understand. My mom and dad tell me when we're in the car that the people that are asking for money, they're just lazy and need to get a job. There it is. Mm-hmm. That kid's opinion will never change unless he has some kind of experience that is so heavy, it snaps the belief system his parents have given him and alters his perspective moving forward.
Right.
That's the only reason I'm here.
Well, that's the only reason I'm having you here too, because you have such a really cool perspective, and having your wits and leveraging the educational process of the things that you've experienced is so helpful to someone like me to help pass on to other people who share that perspective.
Sure.
Like I said, I think there are still the vast majority, honestly, I think everything's a black and white about prisoners, about homeless, about addicts, about any of that.
Yeah.
And so you have to highlight extraordinary stories and get opinions from somebody who's actually been there.
Yeah.
To understand a little bit better about the thought process. And again, it's not an excuse, but it's a reason to have compassion and at least look into a way that we can improve what we have.
That's right. That's right. And by the way, just because I know this, my girlfriend and I, we went into 7-Eleven yesterday for some snacks, and the guy said, "Hey man, you got any change?" Well, I don't carry cash, hardly ever. I also don't give people money that ask for money. I said, "I don't got any cash." And he said, "Okay, you can just get me a pack of Newport 100s. I'm not getting you Newport 100s. I'm also not going to give anybody Newport 100s that's standing on a corner with a sign. I'm not going to give them money either. There are certain individuals that I recognize are crafty in their homelessness, and they don't need my help. Mm-hmm. There's plenty of other individuals that don't know what they're going through or how they got there that will give them that $5. I'm looking for the individual that's going through the trash can.
Right.
Right. I'm looking for somebody that's not asking for money, and I'll take them to dinner. You hungry? Let's go get some food.
Yeah.
We're not going to go, eat outside. We'll go and eat inside. I remember I took this one lady to Chipotle back in my hometown, and I don't give a shit what people think when I'm there. She was beat up, but it was near Christmas, and I just thought to myself, like, she needs somebody to treat her like a human being. Mm-hmm. She's obviously in a tough place. Let's go sit down and eat. And she was talking crazy shit, but that's cool. Yeah. Oh yeah. Because she was spun out on meth.
Yeah.
But to me, it didn't matter.
That wasn't the purpose. Yeah.
No, the meal was important, and treating her like, she's a human being is important. One of the things I do too is, like, when I meet homeless people that I've stopped for, I always ask their name. I want to know what their name is and where they're from. how long they've been on the street,
dignity and respect.
Right? And I always put their name down on my phone. And I'll go through that list and I can remember every face because my interaction is authentic. And when I write it down, I never forget their face.
That's fantastic.
Even if it's just a 3-minute deal, it's so important for me to just treat them like they're human beings. But at the same time, recognize the dude asking for Newport 100s don't need Newport 100s. Chances are he's already got a carton of them.
Right.
He's hustling you.
Yeah.
That's the type of individual I would say, you know what, my man? This doesn't have to be the way you do things. If you applied this hustle in another way, life would look totally different for you. You'd probably be a successful business person. But how do we get that person who doesn't trust me, society, or his family to see that there's something better for himself?
Right. Even just if other people would do that, incremental improvements in dignity and recognizing that maybe there is someone that they can trust and stuff, it's going to also move us forward because eventually they get that offer for housing.
Yeah.
And they realize maybe that's one of those folks that took me to Chipotle this out.
Yeah. And I think that our systems just need to get better from what I've seen. I mean, obviously we're making strides, but again, it's overextension of compassion with the homeless community. Some of them need to be figured. We need to figure out which ones need to be in a mental hospital, and they need to be held against their will.
Sure.
Because what I try to explain to people is letting people live in the streets and putting them in jail is no different. You don't care on either side of the spectrum. You can tell me, oh, they're human beings. They fell on hard luck. Oh, so you're just going to leave them there? What kind of fucking leader are you? They belong in prison. Get them off our streets. Well, what kind of leader are you? You're not. You're not trying to fix the problem.
You're pawning them off.
You're pawning them off. You're trying to ignore it. Like I just went to Portland, Oregon. Dude, I cannot believe it. Homeless people pitch tents right out in front of your house. Imagine walking out to get in your car and a tent being there.
No thanks.
What? How is that okay?
Yeah.
Like this is not, we're not helping people.
It's an illustration of how bad the problem has become, right?
Yeah.
It's essentially what it is.
On a societal level, right?
Yeah.
We have to step up and say, this isn't working. Because if this was a business in a market-driven capitalistic society, it's failing. It's out of business. It's bankrupt.
Right. Close
the doors and let somebody else come in and start an idea that actually has a product that works.
Yeah. I'm totally with you on that. Well, those are some really great ideas too.
Yeah.
Thanks. So you want to get into politics?
Sure. Yeah. No, I don't. I won't make it. They'll hate me too quick. I call a spade too quick.
Yeah. Well, unfortunately, that's kind of what we need though too, is somebody that feels like they can make a difference and is willing to just wade through the mud. And you're right. Maybe you wouldn't make it the first step just because, but I don't know.
Well, I've learned a lot. In California, Newsom's buddies get all the contracts for the homeless housing.
Hello.
It ain't about to help people.
No.
It's about generating millions of dollars for people that they know, and that's all it is.
Right.
Everything is a money grab now.
Politics at its lowest,
yeah,
essentially, but not atypical. I would say that double negative, but it's not atypical. A lot of people see that, and then it just births new conspiracy theories too, where eventually people are just not even thinking about rational ideas and putting ideas out because there's always those examples that they can cite, these jackasses that doing stuff like that.
And that's unfortunate. With all the media that we have right now, there's more confusion than there's ever been.
It's unbelievable,
isn't it?
It's amazing.
More confusion, and we can get more information at the snap of a finger than we ever have. And people have never been more confused and more divided in my lifetime.
I know. I haven't seen it since. Yeah, I was going to say, even with the 9/11 anniversary, I haven't seen the country even remotely as close as we became there. It takes something like that for us all to unite behind in order to get anything really done.
Yeah, it's unfortunate.
Okay, so with enough of the digression, but
Sure.
I appreciate so much your thoughts on a lot of those things.
Yeah.
So you had a talent in BMX way back. You're an athlete. You were bored. You had social anxiety, struggled, made some bad decisions, got into dope. The dope forced further bad decisions. You ended up homeless. You ended up getting a probation revocation and going to prison on a 4-year sentence. You did 2.
Mm-hmm.
And then when you pick it up from there and finish out your story, because this really isn't a tragic story. Obviously you're here.
Yeah.
And you always have the snazzy shoes.
Yeah,
so there has to be a reason.
Sure. Yeah. You know what? When I was in prison, I had a spiritual experience before I got to prison, and that kind of altered my perspective. And that altering in perspective really gave me just a spark of hope. And I thought to myself, I don't belong here, and not that I have that internal dialogue where other people belong there. It's just about me, right? I can't control other people's lives, but I don't belong here. And luckily for myself, mom and dad have been married for 47 years or 37 years this year. And I had a foundation, right? So I was able to fall back on some of that, but I also had to do a lot of work within myself where I went back through situations starting when I was a young kid, and I replayed these events that, I had a bad attitude. I walked out and quit. I wasn't trying hard enough. And I thought to myself, this is really my fault. It's nobody else's fault. And so there was this accountability that I was willing to accept that helped catapult this change. And it wasn't until I held myself accountable that I was able to forgive others and myself and see the situation as an opportunity to learn and grow and not repeat those same mistakes. That's extremely difficult for somebody to do, even that hasn't been to prison. The second thing that I did was I created a vision for myself. Okay, well, what do I want to do when I get out of here? And me being kind of the type A personality that gets in the car and tests how fast it can go first thing, I said, I'm going to go to the Olympics. I'll get back on my bike because I truly believe now and understand the gift that I was given in athletics, that if I exercised that gift to its fullest, nothing could stop me. So I created this vision. I was going to get back on my bike. I was going to go to the Olympics.
This is while you're still in prison.
I'm in prison. Yeah.
Okay.
I'm in a prison cell, 8x12. I'm not even in dorm living yet. I'm in with guys that are attempted murderers, mayhem charges. And so I started working on doing what it was going to take for me to get there. And, people that listen to my story, the one thing is always the micro process. It started with brushing my teeth every single day. It was learning how to brush my teeth every single day, making my bed and organizing my stuff. Really, it was about understanding how to organize the 3 feet that were in front of me. If I could learn how to organize the 3 feet in front of me, I would be moving 3 feet forward every single day. And eventually I would find myself 3 feet in front of me at the Olympics, and I would be managing the Olympics. And if I was unable to manage the 3 feet in front of me, I had an opportunity to stop, take a breath, look at why I couldn't manage that 3 feet, and then learn how to manage it. And then I would continue forward in my journey. And so while I'm in prison, I'm developing this vision. And then I decide, this is really about me helping other people. I really want to help kids not go down the same path that I went down. And I want to speak and tell people about my story that can help other people. And the one thing that was great about developing a vision that helped other people and didn't serve myself was that I found I was able to work harder when you depend on me.
Yeah.
Right. If I depend on me, it's easy for me to say, I don't care.
Yeah. And it's removing the spotlight again, too.
Right.
This is your form of being a leader where it really does matter. And you can pour into the fact that you have a purpose that's outside of yourself instead of, I'm going to go speak so that I can draw attention to myself.
Right. It's interesting. I've been introduced to Darren Waller. I don't know if you know anything about football. He plays for the Raiders. He tight end, has a very similar story to mine. I went on his podcast. He's going to be coming to the house before he plays the Cowboys, and we're going to record his story. But I was watching one of his clips, and I think he was at a team where Harbaugh was the coach. He came in and he says, if you don't love football, just walk out now. And Darren said, I was about ready to walk out. He's like, I don't love football. I really don't care. And I immediately thought to myself, he didn't care because he didn't understand why he was there. It wasn't about him. Right. And from all of my life, for 23 years of my life, it was always about me. Mm-hmm. When I wanted to start the nonprofit organization, when I wanted to become a speaker, and then I learned that going to the Olympics was bigger than myself. It was like every day I worked, it was like people need my story. People need to have what I'm about to do. And what I'm about to do is going to give people light in the tunnel that they're in, or give people a rope in the valley that they're stuck down in, the pit that they're stuck in, and give them that blueprint.
Yeah.
Right. And I really wanted to give people the blueprint. And I think I was really tested on that because I had developed the ability to manage the 3 feet in front of me. I became emotionally aware, or more emotionally aware of myself. Why do I feel this way? Why do I react to situations this way? How can I change the way I react based on a feeling? I can't change the way I feel about certain things, but I can change the way that feeling directs a behavior. All of these things occurred in the 2 years that I was in prison. Had to sacrifice a lot. Didn't hang out with people. Stuck to myself. Went against the grain in some ways when it wasn't going to cause me or other people harm. And so when I got out, I got on my bicycle. 5 months after, I raced my first professional BMX race I'd ever raced in my life. And this was after my parole agent told my mom I was full of shit and that I was going to go back to prison, and that this crazy story of all these things that I was going to do.
He needs to go get a job in a cafeteria, and he's talking about racing bikes.
Yeah. Well, he told my mom that I belonged in a halfway house. And because my dad and mom accepted me back into the house under the pretense of this grandiose vision, I was going to go back to prison. He wanted my mom to know it was going to be her and my husband's fault. Told her straight to her face. And but 5 months later, I take third place in my first pro race. That first year, I won 5 races in the lower pro division, get moved up to the Olympic level. I started public speaking in 2010. Wasn't getting paid for it. It wasn't about a career. It was just about helping people. My first year, in 2011, as a elite pro, which is where all the Olympians are, I made 6 finals, which is an amazing feat. Most people get into AA pro and don't make any finals and quit after a year. But I blew my knee out in 2011. And so now I'm confronted with, devastation. I'm 28 years old. The vision of going to the Olympics as an athlete is looking really grim now. One, because my parents want me to make money for obvious reasons. They don't want to. I'm 28. I'm an adult.
Yeah. Don't get bored now.
Yeah. We supported you in the race vision. Now it's starting to look a little bit grim. My mom had to talk with me, son, you need to learn how to make some money. And that was a tough talk because I was racing. I was public speaking, getting ready to start my nonprofit organization, but none of them were careers.
Right.
None of them were bringing in money in, right?
Sure.
I have a knee surgery with no pain medication. And the reason I tell you this story is because the only reason I was able to do it with no pain medication, I had my ACL reconstructed and my medial and lateral meniscus reconstructed. I almost basically shattered my tibia because of the bone bruising. I had an impact at 30 miles an hour. The impact snapped my ACL, obliterated my medial meniscus, lacerated my lateral meniscus, and severely bone bruised the tip of my tibial head.
Which must have been great for rehab when you had no more meniscus. I'm sure after that bone bruising is just going to be...
Yeah, terrible. Yeah. They had to test because I had a sports doctor that rushed me into surgery a month later. And they said the bone bruising was so severe still even a month later that they had to drill in it just a little bit to make sure it wasn't going to shatter.
Oh.
Because it was so close to breaking.
Yeah.
So I tell them I'm not doing pain meds. I had a surgery on my hand when I was 21 and it caused me to relapse. And so I said, you know what? I can't risk this.
Not a good reason. Yeah.
It's not a good reason to try this, right? Well, I wake up and I'm screaming in pain. It was so painful, dude. I've never experienced pain like this, which is obvious. I didn't take any pain meds. And they told me, I don't think you're going to be able to do this. Well, my dad ended up coming in because I kept yelling and bring my dad. My dad's holding my hand. It's a really big moment for me and my dad. He's not like a huge lovey-dovey guy. You know, I heard I love you for the first time at 23 years old when I was in prison.
Wow.
Never remember my dad telling me I love you ever before that. Yeah. He said, what do you want to do, son? And I said, if I take these pain meds, I don't think kids will ever hear my story ever again because it's going to cause me to relapse. And he said, well, then we're not going to take pain meds. If it wasn't for other people, I wouldn't have done it. I would have gave in. If it was about me relieving myself from pain in that moment, I would have gave in.
That's what put you in that situation in the first place.
Right. Was relieving myself of my own pain, right? Instead, I let that pain ride and I used other people's need to hear my story as what was going to push me just another inch. I remember hearing one of the guys that was a part of was maybe SEAL Team 6 when he actually jumped off that cliff. Like that's a true story. Like he jumped off the cliff when they were being attacked by the Middle Eastern terrorist group, and he broke his back and his legs, and he crawled 10 miles. Like when I heard this story, like he fucking crawled 10 miles, and he said he would reach his hand out, and he would draw a line, and he would just reach just a finger in front of it.
Yeah.
All I need to do is go in front of the line one time. For 10 miles, he did that. And for me, that was my moment. I need to do this for somebody else.
Yeah.
This isn't about me. I have to make it to the finish line on this test. Otherwise, I'm going to cause other people to not have the hope and the inspiration that they need to survive their story. And so it just really gave me more mental toughness. And then I started my nonprofit organization right after that knee surgery. I started coaching BMX athletes. I still loved helping people, and I was starting to get really smart with coaching. So by the time 2016 had come around, my nonprofit was raising over $120,000 a year. We were giving away $40,000 worth of bicycles, $10,000 worth of skateboards, created what I think was the sickest after school program, sickest summer camps. Kids were camping out at 4:00 in the morning to sign up for our summer camp because it was free. Awesome. And they got a $400 bike, backpacks, all kinds of stuff to be a part of it. Like we were giving kids opportunities that were never going to get bikes.
Yeah.
An opportunity to get bikes. I mean, kids would come from the hood on the bus with grandma miles just to get to this summer camp because they wanted that bike at the end.
That's awesome.
And then in 2016, I was a part of the Olympic Games as a coach. I became a very established coach in BMX and coached some very decorated athletes, 2 world champions, 3 national champions, several kids that had been to the Olympics, and Brooke Crane, who I did go to the Olympics with. She took 4th place. And then my speaking over the years became a career of all things. After about 4 years, my momentum had gained so much speed that people were offering to pay me, where it was like, can you give me $50 for gas and my time? No, we can't do that. Or we thought you would have donate your time to 34 schools this year. And it's like, what? Like you don't donate your time, like you see that I have value,
right? But
you can't pay me. And then finally the momentum hit to where it was a career. And then that career has become a very flourishing career that's allowed me to, pay taxes, build a custom home like I'm doing right now.
Yeah.
And reach audiences that, some very prestigious stages that I've spoke to some very high-end individuals, but I also get to speak to just young kids like I've always wanted to do and try and educate them. And just, that's it. I'm not trying to scare anybody with my story. I want to educate people with my story.
Yeah.
Right? The mechanics, stuff that you've asked about, people that don't ask me about, the homeless population, but you'd have to actually want those perspectives to ask that question.
And you, by the way, are a fabulous speaker. I mean,
thanks.
Whatever you base that on, I think it's magnificent. And I also have found purpose in going outside of myself. It helps me, it's almost impossible for me to talk about myself. And, people laugh about it. So like, you need to tell your story. That's why I had, when I was speaking, when we were in that same deal, I had somebody kind of overseeing the conversation and everything. I struggle with it but I know mentally the purpose behind it, and there's nothing wrong with it. And I admire you for that. And that's something that even one of my questions was, how much of your success do you attribute to seeing outside of yourself to help others? And I think I think that's the key to your success.
100%.
And I think it's an amazing what you've done.
100%. And I've just had to learn how to be authentic. It's been a little bit harder to, direct where my career goes with the pandemic because I lost almost all of my work. So I had to take work as it came to me. But as I've grown as a speaker, there was a group in Oklahoma that wanted me as a speaker. They offered me under budget, which usually I'll take. If I'm not speaking on that day, I'll go, if we can make it work, we'll make it work. But they told me I had to cover my tattoos. And I told them I'm the wrong guy. If you want me to cover up who I am, then you're not looking for me.
Yeah, you're missing.
And I think that just me remaining authentically who I am has really made me successful. And, when I was in Oregon, I was telling my girl, I gave my speech. It was an hour and a half with Q&A. And then it was another 4 hours of shaking hands and talking to individuals. I'm just not the speaker if I don't have a tight schedule that's going to speak, grab a check and go.
Right.
You know, when we spoke at that event, there was another speaker that showed up right before their speech. As soon as their speech was done, took 2 or 3 pictures and was out the back door.
Right.
Which, okay. But for me, it's more than that. It's relationships, right? It's connecting with individuals and really trying to make sure that that impact gets planted deep into the soil that it needs to be planted into. And I think people appreciate that.
Well, I certainly did. I mean, that's how we connected. I mean, I was really appreciative of the fact that you showed up so early. You showed up early because I was your opening act, right?
Yeah, yeah.
So, and I think, and I thought it was remarkable. And again, I will definitely put some links and stuff to the charity, to your book, and certainly to a link to get you to speak, because you do a magnificent job.
Thanks,
in speaking. You just like pull the cord and set you out on the stage, and you're
That's I've done it for so many years. You know, it's I just need to know who I'm speaking to.
Yeah.
You know, and a lot of times people want a specific message. That's fine, but as long as I know who I'm speaking to, I have an idea of what they need to know. Right? It's the stories in my speech are almost always the same, but the messaging in the story is never written. It's always specific to the audience that I'm speaking to, right? Whether it's healthcare professionals, law enforcement, middle school, high school, Division I sports teams, they all get a specific message of how, you know, kind of I've maneuvered my life with my gifts and my struggles and things that we need to change or see differently, or what we can do as individuals to take ourselves to great places and empower others. Because that's, to me, that's what it's about.
Me too, man. You're the king.
I don't know about that, but I'm climbing, bro. I'm climbing.
I'm so grateful for you coming by too. Is there anything going on during this craziness that you wanted to plug or push anything?
You know, I got a podcast. It's been on pause, but I got almost 100 episodes that you can get into. It's called One Choice on iTunes, Spotify, Google Podcast app. My book, The TonyMhoffman Story from Prison to the Olympics, should be out probably before the end of the year.
Excellent.
So that's 300 pages of more insight into some of the things that you asked. Those were already things that I was, you know, very important for me to write in a book. And so that'll be out before the end of the year. And follow me on social media, TonyMhoffman on Instagram, Tony Hoffman Speaking on Facebook. If you have questions about anything that you heard here and wanted some more clarity, I answer everybody back that hits me up on social media. I'm happy to clarify things. A lot of times people will hear certain things and think that it means something different because we may not be able to get the full context and a short podcast. So I'm happy to clarify certain things like that. And then obviously, thanks, bro. Like I was telling my girl, like when we met, I was like, dude, this guy's story is so fucking cool, dude. Like it's crazy. Like I just love how what you went through, would really, in most places, I feel like people would just do their job and leave it at that.
Yeah.
This is just work. So they would have to hold on to this belief system that these people are pieces of shit, that they're thugs, that they're bad people.
Yeah. It'd be easier on me emotionally if that was the case.
Well, you think it would. I think that individuals would think it would. But in reality, I think that it's better to go through that and grow and evolve as a person and see the situation for what it really is, and that it's outside of work, instead of carrying that hatred or resentment towards individuals that you know nothing about. And that's what I say. It's not easier, because if you hold that faulted belief system, then every day you have to hold on to some resentment or anger towards these individuals you don't even know.
Yeah, true.
You know, whereas now, like you can look at individuals that may be struggling or come from different areas, and you can have a more compassionate and loving approach in your thoughts about them, which is freeing within yourself.
Totally.
You know, when you have compassion, empathy, and love, you don't feel tense. You don't feel anger. You want understanding, right? And it puts you in a better position as a human being to kind of draw energy that puts you in a better place to also help other people.
Yeah.
So I loved that about yours. And the other speaker, like I was just like snoozing. I was like, what is great story from mainstream media point, right? But it was like there was no, where's like the ticket? What's the stamp on the ticket? You know, as I was listening to your story, I was just like, man, this is so fucking rad. Like to come out of this and have all of this growth. So I appreciate you. And
well, I think there's a lot of similarities between us too, even though our stories are fairly different. I think there's enough similarities in, what we've learned about humans and different ways that we can approach people from the ways that we were grown and weaned to understand about them. So, and that's kind of the purpose behind here. So I think you're a real impactful guy already. And so hopefully the people that have heard your speeches can also learn something new from this and maybe glean some inspiration to go out and do something good for somebody else. So.
That's right. The other thing is I got a treatment center that I'm opening. I'm going to put my money where my mouth is when it comes to treatment. And we've got a partnership with a person that owns a large staffing agency around the United States.
Oh, wow.
All of our patients, once they're deemed ready by a clinician, a master's level clinician, they'll be given a career.
Oh, wow.
Like not just a job at Starbucks. We're going to be offering them careers, minimum of $20 an hour, retirement benefits, health package benefits. And we're going to hold their hand and show. I truly believe we're going to change the game when it comes to treatment. And the cool part is I don't give a fuck what anybody else is doing. We're going to focus on what we're doing and focus on being great at what we're doing. And so that's like kind of right now one of the things that I'm excited to tell people more about. You got to keep me posted on
that too.
For sure.
That sounds amazing.
Yeah. And, but do another podcast on how that goes once we get it rolling, the proof of concept, why it's working or what things aren't working. So,
yeah. That's fantastic.
Yeah.
Yeah. That's just kind of ignoring like what should be successful and how things are done. It's just kind of throwing the rules out the window and saying, no,
this is what we're going to do.
That's what we need.
Yeah.
That's what we need. I mean,
For
we can't
sure.
keep working inside the box when you know the box is failing us.
Well, it would make me a hypocrite, right? If I started a treatment center that made great money and just did what everybody else did in treatment and not did what I tell the governments we need to do and tell the healthcare community what we need to do. So I'm going to go in, since I'm not seeing anybody do it. The stars have aligned in a way that we can do it. And I'm going to lead the way. And then when I get in front of big crowds, I'm going to say, look, I've been telling you guys this for years and here it is on paper now.
Yeah.
This is what we have to do if we want to see people succeed and get better.
Tony for president.
Yes. Let's do it. No. Don't.
All right.
Thanks, man. I really appreciate it.
I really appreciate you, brother.
Yeah.
All right. Talk again soon.
Yes, sir.
Whoa, don't be sitting down yet. Too much to do. So many without a clue. Playing hard to get. Put your ears on with the ones who ain't gone. To the fool, do that you do. Staging full school rather than picking the ones we can't build on. Sitting down yet. Many a fool can a kingdom rule as long as they don't look back. Look back now. It's clean and cool what you learned in school. It's hard work over fact. Freedom, gotta get free now. Welcome to the some who don't be sitting down yet.
Happily, do this for those before and after me. Trying to pass the baton forward like I'm athletes. Took mine and ran with it, now I'm thinking about the next generation. Give them a platform for progress. Butterfly effect, coming live and direct. Ain't no telling how our decisions will manifest. I ain't crying for help, I can do this on my own. Set my bread, build my wealth, then bring it back to my home. Still my spirit fluctuates like the Dow Jones. I go from Huey P to copies of jewelry. Next from Martin Luther to riding around with my shooters. The balance of it all keeps my heart deeply rooted.
Don't be sitting down yet. Too much to do, so many without a clue. Playing hard to get. Put your ears on with the ones who ain't gone. To the fool, do that you do. Staging full school rather than picking the ones we can't build on. Sitting down yet.
Don't be sitting down, don't be sitting down. Don't be sitting down, don't be sitting down. Don't be sitting down, don't be sitting down. Gotta go and get it, gotta move around. Don't be sitting down, don't be sitting down. Don't be sitting down, don't be sitting down. Don't be sitting down, don't be sitting down. Push it to the limit, know your time is now.
Don't play the fool now. Don't look back now. Just play it cool. Just give me the back now. Freedom, gotta get free. Welcome, welcome.
Don't be sitting down, don't be sitting down. Push it to the limit, know your time is now.
Don't be sitting down yet.